So on this last Sunday of this year, we're finishing off this series that we've been in over the last 5-6 Sundays on radiance. And during this series, we've been looking at different portions in the Gospel of John. And so as we finish up this series today, we're going to be in John chapter 11. And it's going to have some of the same themes that we've been looking at throughout this series, the whole aspect of kind of life and death. We're going to have the aspect of darkness and light. That's one of the things that John, throughout his gospel, keeps bringing us to this idea that we live in the darkness sometimes of sin, and sin kind of can come and create a lot of darkness. But then there's this light that Jesus is the light. We're going to see that today. We're going to see Jesus and be pretty, in some ways, confusing, troubling in some of the things that he ends up saying, but then the wonder of wonders is something happens that only he can do, as we're going to look. And so during this series of Radiance, we've kept kind of asking this question, saying that you know Jesus, but do you know Jesus? And the whole premise of this series is that the radiance of Jesus is known, but there's always more to it. There's just so much more to Jesus than we can really ever take in. But he always gives us enough, but to always realize that there's more. There's more to who this Jesus is. So we've been experiencing over the last number of days, hopefully, moments of just kind of Christmas radiance. The wonder of who this Jesus is, not only at Christmas, but really every day of the year, whether we're kind of feeling it or not feeling it, he's always radiance. But we've been looking at the verse. The verse for this whole series has been some words from Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, where it says, "The Son is the radiance of God's glory." And there's something about the radiance of God's glory that Jesus is that, again, never diminishes. We know that it's awesome to see the sun today. We haven't seen the sun for a few days, but we know that sun is still shining even when it's cloudy. We know that Jesus is still radiant, even at times when maybe our vision isn't as much, or maybe at times when we're tired, maybe at times when we're sick, maybe at times when we're wrestling with some of the things that happen to us that just kind of would seem to diminish the radiance. We know that we're in the days past Christmas now, and we've heard for over the years that there's sometimes the Christmas blues. But that's on us, where Jesus is not blue after Christmas. There's probably in some ways, some really good reasons for us to be a little blue after Christmas, because we've kind of maybe have celebrated, and our bodies are just going to kind of be tired, or sometimes even all the experiences, all the things that we've kind of taken in, all the colors, all the sounds, all the just being together, all the smiling at times, it can just kind of override all of our circuits, and there's a part that we just gotta come down a little bit. But Jesus is still radiant. He's just still so radiant. So even as we had our granddaughter got sick after Christmas Eve, and so wasn't able to come and celebrate Christmas Day with us, and the whole, some of the prayers that you have, some of the prayers is there's some sickness in your families. Maybe there's even a death that's happened. So there's just all this sort of thing that can bring down our feeling of kind of radiance and that. But with Jesus, he's just always radiant. And he comes and is with us when we're just kind of floating with a lot of beauty. And he's with us when some of those dark things happen. He's always the light. So as we come to this story in John chapter 11, there's just so much to it. So it's kind of a long passage. I'm going to do a lot of reading. You get to hear kind of the whole story from John chapter 11. Then even as we hear it, even as I stop and make a few comments along the way, we're going to, I think, hopefully be moved by the radiance that is in this passage, moved by the radiance of who Jesus is, and moved to follow him, moved to be amazed by him, moved to have this wonder of him, but also hope for us to realize that it's so true for me, even as I kind of try to do my best to open this up as much as I can. There's so much more. So that a day from now, if you would go and read this passage, or a week from now, if you'd go, or a year from now, or a decade from now, if you'd go and read this passage again, it would open up more. That's just who our Jesus is, and he always has gifts for us as his followers. So here's what we read here in John chapter 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany. So we get his name, we get the place where he lives. It's the village of Mary and her sister Martha. So we kind of just, if you've been in church world for a while, you've heard the story of Mary and Martha. You know, there's this little incident, and then we're introduced that they have this brother Lazarus, and it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair. We'll come back to that when we get towards the end of this passage. But again, John wants us to remember kind of the whole history that this family has with Jesus. So it was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent to him, to Jesus, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. And just the wonder of that phrase that John captures. The one whom you love is ill. To kind of be known as the one whom Jesus loves. And we know, if we think about that for a moment, Lazarus is not the only one whom Jesus loves. All of us could put our name there. The one whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. You know, what do you do with that? We're going to see here that the disciples aren't going to understand what Jesus just said. They're just going to kind of think that, you know, he should just go and make Lazarus well, and we'll just move along. But there's so much more here. You know, really, it ties into what the Hebrew writer would be inspired to say. Maybe he's reflecting on even these words of Jesus, where he'll say, the Son is the radiance of God's glory. There's just that connection. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Can we know that this passage, John will hint after this, that Lazarus being risen from the dead, spoiler alert, I just spoiled, right? No, you already know the story. But it's going to be what leads him to be propelled kind of in fast motion towards the cross. There will be people that cannot deny this miracle. They knew, they're just bona fide, certified Lazarus was dead. We'll get to that. And so when Jesus raises him from the dead, threat to the powers that be. And so that kind of put it in fast motion for Jesus to go to the cross. And then, so with all of that, it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. The power that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. When he dies, there's going to be more glory. He won't raise himself from the dead, but the Father will. And the glory that comes from that, the glory that is still with us today, a few days after Christmas, on this last Sunday of 2014, the glory that is still with us whether we're feeling a little bit under the weather, whether we're a little bit tired, whether we have a little bit of blues creeping in, or whether somehow we just kind of are going along. The glory is still here with us. And then again, just amazing, verse 5. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Man, that we just put our names in there. Now, Jesus loved Jeff and his wife, Lori, and his adult children, their spouses, his grandchildren. Jesus loved. I mean, you put your name and your family in. Jesus loved. Again, to have it written down, man. And then here's where it kind of goes. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Again, this is kind of this was a 911 call. And the disciples, I think, just expected Jesus that he's going to get up and he's going to rush off to Bethany and, he's going to heal Lazarus. But it says he stays 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, now let's go to Judea again. And the disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you, and you're going there again? Jesus answered, and this is Jesus, are there not 12 hours in a day? Just kind of asked this question. I mean, they're just going, okay. And then, if anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of the world. There's the light. There's the light. It's day. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. So there's always this kind of interplay between the darkness and the light. And Jesus is the light. He's going to bring light to the darkness. He's going to bring light to our darkness. He's going to bring light to the darkness of the disciples. He keeps bringing light. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. And the disciples said to him, well, Lord, if he is falling asleep, he will recover. Sometimes, the best thing to do is just to go and if you're sick, if you got the flu, if you got a cold, sometimes just get some rest. If you're real grouchy, take a nap. We've talked about that over and over. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you could do is to take a nap. I believe in spiritual naps. And so the disciples are just going, oh, okay, he just needs to sleep. We've had to sleep before to get past something. He's just going to sleep and then get past it. And so the disciples said, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. But now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought he meant taking rest in sleep. And then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died. And then he goes on and says something, again, I think just rather confusing and startling, and maybe still even confusing and startling to us. And for your sake, I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But now let us go to him. And Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. And one of these things just kind of not even sure that I can explain it. I'm not even sure all that's going on. They just kind of thought, well, the Jewish people, the authorities were just almost putting Jesus to death because of some of the interchanges that have happened. Now they're going to return kind of to the scene of all that incident. And so it just kind of assumes, well, let's go. Yeah, we'll die with them. Then it says this in... as we read the Bible over and over, just that there will be times that we just take moments to realize what it is that we are reading and why it is that the writer, the inspired writer, would write it like this. So we read this in verse 17. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. 4 days. And John is going to continue to remind us of these 4 days. There's no way that he has just kind of gone into a coma, that he just kind of is, fallen asleep and he's going to awake. He's been in the tomb 4 days. We'll come back to that in a few moments as the story goes on. Then it says Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. Again, just kind of a geography reference there to let us know that Jerusalem is not far away. Jerusalem is where most of the action is going to take place in the remaining chapters of the Gospel of John. But this Bethany, just about 2 miles away. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So there's this community going on. And like for many of us, when someone close to us dies, there's family that comes around, there's friends that come around to support us, to comfort us, to walk with us during those times. Same kind of thing happening here. And so when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, he shall yet live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? That's not a question just to Martha. It's a question to all of us who would follow Jesus. Do you believe this? That Jesus is with you, even when hard things happen to you. Even when things that you don't like happen. Like the suffering of a loved one. Like the suffering of your child. That Jesus is with you. Do you believe this? She says to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. That you are the Christ, the Son of God." Again, that's not something that she just kind of came up with on her own. As Jesus would speak to Peter when he makes that confession that you are the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus will say to Peter, "You did not come up with this, but the God, the Father, has revealed that to you and has helped you believe that, has helped you to follow that." Jesus is saying basically the same thing to Martha now. As she confesses this, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." And then when she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary. So, I want us to just have a moment here, and this is some of this kind of holy speculation, that Martha goes back to the house. And wherever Jesus is, if he's on the outskirts of the town, or so does 15 minutes go by, does 30 minutes go by, that Martha walks back to the house, has a brief conversation with Mary, and then Mary is going to come up. That's what we're going to read about next. What's Jesus and the disciples and maybe a few others doing during that time? Is there just silence? Maybe. Are they just kind of looking around and considering life? Are they remembering some of the stories? Are they remembering some of the miracles? Are they remembering Jesus walking on water? Are they remembering him feeding the crowd? Are they remembering him raising a little girl? What are you remembering when there's moments of quiet, when there's moments of silence between Jesus being with you? And so when she had heard it, Mary, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who were with her in the house, again, that kind of comforting community, it says that consoling her, when they saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now, when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet. You can remember how it started? John reminds us that Mary is the one who has been at the feet of Jesus before. And here she is at the feet of Jesus again. And it's just a good place to be sometimes. Not all the time, but every once in a while. Probably not in a public setting like this. But sometimes when you have moments with Jesus, maybe it would be good to kneel by your bedside. Maybe it would be even good to kneel and put your face on the carpet or on the wood floor. There's something about kneeling at the feet of Jesus that Mary returned to do that. And then it says, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, almost the same thing that her sister had said, Martha, my brother would not have died. But now here's all. When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. And then these amazing two words, the shortest verse in the Bible, John 11, verse 35, our favorite verse to memorize when you were a kid. Jesus wept. It's pretty easy to memorize that verse. In fact, why don't we just say those two words together? Jesus wept. So we know that verse. But do we know that verse? Jesus wept. I think there's a radiance in that verse. I mean, there's something that moves us that Jesus wept at these two grieving sisters. He had spent a lot of time. I read a book, I believe it was earlier this year. The name of the author was Frank Viola. And he wrote this book called The Best Place on Earth. And he makes this case that Bethany is kind of this safe place for Jesus. Again, we know the story of Martha and Mary. You know, when Jesus comes with his disciples, there's probably a few others there. And Jesus is teaching and Mary is sitting at his feet. And Martha's in the kitchen kind of preparing a huge meal for, maybe 20 people. And some of you just got over doing some of that for Christmas. You know how much work goes into that. So Martha is just kind of really working it up. And Mary, she just expects any moment that Mary's going to come and start helping her, that Mary's going to walk away. And she doesn't. And finally, Martha gets so exasperated. She goes in and kind of lets Jesus have it that Mary is sitting there. And you know what Jesus responds to her? But over and over, this author makes the case that Jesus goes to Bethany to rest. He goes to Bethany, a safe place. Get in Jerusalem? Not so much. Long before the whole episode of the cross. There's always kind of some arguments breaking out. The Pharisees, the scribes, religious leaders coming at him. We read about even when he's up in his hometown of Nazareth, doesn't go well there. When he goes to Capernaum, when he's sometimes by the Sea of Galilee, there's confrontations there. But this Bethany, the home of Lazarus and Martha and Mary, so he weeps. He weeps. I think there's a radiance to his weeping. Some of you know that one of my prayers over the years has been that Jesus would give me the gift of tears. Because there's just something broken inside of me that I don't cry much. Every once in a while you'll see me choke up here. And every once in a while, if I watch It's a Wonderful Life, there's a few scenes in there that will make me tear up. But I haven't had a real good weeping session for a long time. And I think there's just something broken in me with that. Some of you don't have that problem. You can weep at the drop of a hat. I think that's a gift. Even though it's one of those gifts that sometimes we just don't know what to do with. And sometimes people around us don't know what to do with it. But that Jesus wept. Oh, there's some radiance there. And I'm hoping to discover more of that radiance. And then it says, so the Jews said, see how he loved him? God, to see Jesus weep. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have also kept this man from dying? And we were looking at that last week, John chapter 9, just this huge miracle that, this man born blind comes to see by Jesus. And so a huge, huge miracle. And now couldn't Jesus, who did that, couldn't he just kind of healed him of whatever disease it was so he didn't have to die? And then it says, Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave and a stone lay against it. I've never really caught this before. But just a few days from Jesus looking from the outside of this cave with a stone rolled against it, he would be inside that cave, or a cave like it, with a stone rolled against it. And then Jesus said, take away the stone. And Martha, kind of being always the practical, he says, Martha, the sister of the dead man, just so we never forget the connection there, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. Again, just to give you a geographical reference here, this wasn't happening in Wisconsin in the dead of winter. It could be dead for 40 days. Still be frozen, no odor. But in the Holy Land, or maybe the temperatures had gotten up to 80s, 90s, even maybe into the hundreds over 4 days. If you know your biology. So Martha was saying, man, But something more is going to happen here, as we know. But Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? A glory that she couldn't imagine. A glory that even as we read this, I don't know that we can imagine it. Although it's yeah. So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father. Again, just the radiance of him saying Father, and inviting us to say Father. Again, there's just the Father, Father, Father. I thank you that you've heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said these things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. I love it. I've heard messages on this before and that Jesus specifies Lazarus, come out, because if he had just said come out, there would have been all kinds of people coming out. But he just says, Lazarus, come out. Lazarus, come out. And if you see the Son of God movie, this is where the one scene, I love the Son of God movie. There's so much Bible that they use as Jesus is speaking this. But in this scene, he goes into the tomb, does this little touchy-feely thing with Lazarus' head, and kind of he just gets up. And it's like, okay, I'll get over it. Lazarus come out, and the man who had died came out, his hands and his feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Again, just trying to imagine being there. And in a sense, why this is recording in the scripture is for us to be there. To realize that something is present, something is walking among us, someone, some power, some hope, some radiance, some truth, some life, some promise. The wonder of all of Christmas, all of Easter, all of the Bible, just coming to just the wonder of that Jesus can speak, and a dead man who's been dead for 4 days comes out. And they're going to go to Martha and Mary and Lazarus' house and sit there maybe for a few more hours before Jesus will ride into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey until a few days later, he's in a darkened tomb with a stone rolled in front of it. And the greatest of miracles is about to happen. This is an amazing miracle, but it's not the greatest. We know that Lazarus has to die twice, because Lazarus isn't anywhere in this world walking around having been raised from the dead. He died again. He had 2 last breaths until he got that first eternal breath. The greatest miracle is Jesus taking the last breath, sharing that last breath with all of us. The grace and the mercy of that last breath that Jesus shares with us. And then the hope, just kind of the undying, radiant hope that Jesus is with us in every breath. In every breath of Christmas joy, in every breath of Christmas troubles, in every breath as we come to the end of this year, in every breath as we begin a new year, Jesus, 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 the radiance of who he is. And so the Gospel of John, boy, it just sparkles with radiance. Kind of like the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Kind of like all the New Testament epistles. Kind of like so many passages of the Old Testament. Radiant, 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 radiant. And it is enough. And there is more. So we come to the end of this year with the radiance of Jesus. We begin 2015 with the radiance of Jesus. Let's stand, let's pray, sing one more song, and we'll go on our way and watch some Packers and Lions and see who gets to be radiant at the end of this day. So Jesus, the wonder of you being our Christmas Jesus, the wonder of singing so many amazing songs, the wonder of contemplating that you are the light of the world in the darkest of nights. There is a star that's shone, that there is a love in so many hearts that is radiated throughout these years, that we're here in this year, that we're here at the end of this year, kind of building on all of the radiance that has gone before us, building on all the radiance that's going to come after us, building on the radiance, the radiance, the radiance, always the radiance of Jesus with us. Whether we feel it with excitement or whether we don't feel it that much. But there is a truth that the radiance, the sun, is the radiance of God's glory. Jesus, help us to live in your radiance. We ask it in your name. Amen.